Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mouflon Masası. We have Halef and Kim with me today, and very special guest, Özdil Nami, former Turkish Cypriot Chief Negotiator. Hopefully, he will answer our questions. Before we start, thank you again for joining and accepting our invitation. Mr. Nami, to begin with, I think we can start asking questions about the Crans-Montana. You were one of the architects of the road it took us to Crans-Montana. So where we left Crans-Montana in 2017, and how long do you think we need to cover the last remaining mile to have the solution for a Cyprus problem?
Yes. First, thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm quite excited to participate and extremely pleased that the young generation, such as yours, is showing interest in what's going on, because you will take the flag and hopefully help cross the finishing line. We failed to do that in Crans-Montana despite our best efforts. There are various reasons why. We can get to those. But your first question was, where did we leave? Where did we leave? I think the answer to that question was given by the UN Secretary General Guterres himself after in the report that he prepared after the collapse of Crans-Montana. And in that report, he basically said the solution was on the table. These are his words. And he said what was lacking to cross the finishing line was political will. For all intents and purposes, the most difficult subjects that has been under discussion, negotiation, whatever you call it, in the past 50 and more years about the Cyprus problem, found its technical solutions. As you would remember, we had divided the Cyprus problem under 6 main headings: governance and power sharing, property, economy, EU relations, territory, and security and guarantees. So on all issues except for security and guarantees, we narrowed the gap between the two sides to a bridgeable distance. That's why we felt confident to go to a conference format to discuss the issue of security and guarantee and call the guarantors. Because they told us that they would only participate if the two sides had narrowed down their differences to a bridgeable distance. This was also the precondition of the Secretary General. And once we exhausted all that could have been done, only by negotiations between the two sides on the island, it became clear that to cross the finishing line, we need one final push, and we needed to include the debate on security and guarantees into the mix and go for a final give and take across all chapters and in a package form, and bring all the remaining issues across the finishing line together. So it was out of this need that we left Cyprus, went to Geneva, called the guarantor powers, and held the Crans-Montana meetings. The short answer is the solution is on the table. And you ask how long do we still need to wrap it up, the remaining issues. In the conferences that I get invited to with my previous negotiating counterpart, Mavroyannis, I usually say 3 months. He intervenes and says, no, we only need a month. So it's a matter of months. If there is political will, it can be done quite rapidly. but the question is whether there is political will or not.
Cool. You previously called for the release of the Crans-Montana Convergences. I remember watching with Urban Cypriot and Fidias and Mavroyanis.
Right.
Recent news reports suggest that the UN is preparing a new document of convergences. And I'm wondering what the difference between the 2017 document and the 2026 one is. Like, why do we even need one? Is there a chance that there's maybe divergences on the convergences?
That's an excellent question. I am asking the same question myself. I found it very confusing that the UN has been given, or it has taken itself the task of preparing the convergences again. This is not; those papers are not UN papers, and United Nations was not the pen holder. All the convergence papers were prepared by the two sides out of a Cypriot-owned, Cypriot-led process. Those are our documents. And we don't have a Greek Cypriot version, Turkish Cypriot version, or UN version. These were common papers. So everybody had this exact same paper. So it's quite confusing and difficult to understand what they're trying to do. I hope it is not just another tactic to delay a serious debate on the missing link or the missing piece of the puzzle in Crans-Montana, which was the question of methodology. Since his election, our president, Mr. Erhürman, is trying to focus everyone on this missing piece of the puzzle. And he forwarded his 4-point proposal to focus everyone on the need for a new methodology that will assist us to cross the finishing line. Instead of focusing on that, unfortunately, new issues are brought on the table, and I hope this is not one of them.
I think Halef has a question now.
To be honest, my question is a little bit following up from the European Union, but if it's not a problem, I could ask it. So I would like to ask you about two strong arguments about whether Turkey is likely to return to a federal settlement in exchange for a progress on such as the EU SACE program, customs union modernization, or visa liberalization, because there is a new argument upcoming that Ankara sees these issues as a legitimate expectations rather than bargaining chips. Because some people argue that what Turkey did about the Syrian refugees or these kind of issues, for an example, Turkey is also the second biggest army in NATO. Some people argue that these are legitimate expectations rather than bargaining chips or things that Turkey could derive about this Cyprus problem. So do you agree about this idea, or do you think there is a still sufficient attractive package from the EU in order to make Turkey's position to change for federal settlement?
Couple of points. First, I think Turkey already gave that signal by establishing good relations with Mr. Erhürman and supporting the efforts of the Secretary General. This is actually an implied support for a federal settlement. Okay, they are not pronouncing it highly in their official statements, but when you look what they are doing right now is allowing the UN process to proceed, expressing their readiness to participate in a 5+1, provided the preconditions of the Secretary General are met: proper preparation on methodology, some progress on confidence building measures, and some deep discussion on substantive issues. So I think from the Turkish perspective, from the perspective of Ankara, they gave their signal. But we should not be naive enough to say that they will just shout it out loud from the rooftops. Because this is a difficult diplomatic maneuver. They have already asked for the recognition of TRNC from the microphones of the UN General Assembly. We have heard Mr. Erdogan, demanding this, asking for this several times, and so there is that. There is also what is going on in Turkey right now. They are going through a very important process regarding the Kurdish population. And this triggers a lots of nationalistic sentiments. So one should not really expect Turkey to say much more on the Cyprus issue in the way of returning to a federal settlement when they are not sure whether this will be reciprocated by the Greek Cypriot side. So I think the message is there. However, my question is this to those who make that argument: does it matter really? Because in 2004, Turkey was fully on board, and we couldn't go for a settlement. In 2018, they were fully on board. They were in Crans-Montana, and they did their best to finish the Cyprus issue as a bizonal bicommunal federation and have all of Cyprus become a member of the EU without asking you anything in return. Did we manage to get a result? No. So it is not this Turkish policy that they declared after the Crans-Montana which is blocking us from reaching a federal settlement. Unfortunately, it is the lack of political will from the Greek Cypriot side. So if tomorrow Mr. Christodoulides announces his positive answer to Mr. Erhürman's 4-point proposal, I am confident that Turkey will not say, "What are you doing? Those days of federal settlement are over." No, they will give full support. So that's where the real problem lies, and that's where we should, I think, focus.
So since we're on the EU part of the show, I have a question there. In the south, there was a media report that Nikos Christodoulides was having a conversation with Rafael Fito, and Nikos let slip that the EU is prepared to give Fito a legal team to smooth over some of the divergences. So basically, I think you're in an ideal situation to tell our viewers, I know that Turkish Cypriots demand derogations from EU law to preserve the bizonality and bicommunality of the solution. So can you explain what this might look like in practice in a bizonal bicommunal federation, and whether these derogations will be permanent?
These have been thoroughly discussed actually in the period leading up to Crans-Montana, where it was necessary. We had the full participation of the technical people from the European Union, very competent people. They came and they assisted us. So all the convergences we reached right now, including those related to derogations, are there, and whatever we agreed is fully compliant with the EU acquis right now, and there is nothing there that cannot be accommodated by the European Union. Our guiding principle was the settlement will be fully in line with the principles on which the European Union has been founded, but the exact acquis, as you know, many countries, when they are joining, they do get either transitional periods, derogations, some permanent, some transitionary. That would be the case for Turkish Cypriots as well. Let's, for example, take the issue of settlement. Will a Greek Cypriot be able to live freely in Kyrenia, for example, and establish himself there, reside there, earn a living there, so on and so forth. Of course, all Cypriot citizens would be free to live wherever they want. We will be an EU state, all of us together. But the regulation of political rights would be something else. Okay, so the political rights would be regulated. So being able to live in Kyrenia does not necessarily mean that you will exercise all your political rights over there, and that there is nothing in the EU law that prevents you from regulating political rights in that manner. There are many examples. Or property rights. Again, in many countries in Europe, there are regulations to protect the local population and the demographic makeup and the cultural environment there. So again, whatever we were going to put forward would be there. And some of these would be triggered in case of need. So if there is no danger of losing the cultural identity of a specific region, then you don't trigger those. But you must have the option to do so, and these exist in the EU law already. So we would be living in a normal EU state where EU law would apply with its regulations and some derogations, but in a manner which EU can accommodate.
I also have a question regarding the some bits from Crans-Montana. We know sometimes what Turkey says does not perfectly align with what Erhürman says. Did you ever have any disagreements with Turkey during the Crans-Montana period?
Not regarding the substance, no. Everything we did was fully coordinated. But mind you, Turkey never raised an opinion about our property arrangements or governance and power sharing arrangements. They were mainly concerned about two issues. One, the guarantees issue, because they are the signatories to the Treaty of Guarantee, and no one else has the right to speak on their behalf on that issue. The same goes for Greece and the UK. We cannot unilaterally tell them we no longer respect what was given to you under the Treaty of Guarantee or Treaty of Alliance. So those, they reserve themselves, whether they would show flexibility, would accept any change to those. The second point that they were paying attention to was the Greco-Turkish balance, because Cyprus would become a member of the EU, and Greece is already there. This allows Greece many advantages that Turkey would not be able to enjoy automatically. So we had to make special arrangements to establish and protect that balance, knowing very well that Turkey is not in the European Union. So Turkey would be accorded some privileges, some special treatment, but confined to the territory of Cyprus, of course, whether this was related to trade or freedom to travel, so on and so forth. So we would make sure that those issues were fully taken into regard.
Halef, have a question? Or? Sure.
Yeah. Halef, I think was going to ask.
Yes, again, I would like to go into international relations and ask you about the rumors, outgoing rumors. As far as I remember, you had a very great argument about the confidence building measurements. I meant the rumors about the Varoshan. You said that the Greek Cypriots won't have any motivation if the Varoshas gonna be on the confidence building measurements. But I want to ask you about the other part of the rumors as well, which was about the security arrangements, which includes NATO. Do you think that this could be an advantage or disadvantage on the table? And if it's an advantage, my following question is that UN Security Council which also includes China and Russia, are they going to be favorable about any proposal which includes NATO and Cyprus relations in order, when I'm talking about the Cyprus problem solution as a whole? So therefore, about if it's an advantage or disadvantage, and if China or Russia is going to be willing to accept this kind of arrangement about whole engagement solution of Cyprus problem.
I follow this debate and discussion revolving around NATO membership with a bit of an amusement, actually. When we talk about the problem regarding security and guarantees, and take into consideration the Greek Cypriot demand that these should be removed, they talk about the intervention right of Turkey, right? But the intervention rights of Turkey and the whole guarantees agreement is not about protecting Cyprus against outside threats. That mechanism was established to as a tool to address a problem if the two sides start fighting with each other and the internal constitutional order of Cyprus collapses. And guarantor powers were given the right to intervene to re-establish the constitutional order of the country. NATO has nothing to do with the internal constitutional order of its member states. Therefore, you see my point. It's not a remedy for the problem that we are talking about. Okay, so it cannot be, NATO membership cannot be a substitute to the Treaty of Guarantee. NATO membership can be a substitute to Treaty of Alliance, which is a separate thing. Treaty of Alliance did not involve UK. Only Greece and Turkey were parties to it, together with Republic of Cyprus, and it allowed these two countries to station troops here to protect Cyprus from outside threats. That was it. So it must be within that context that this debate should be held. But even if you hold that discussion and decide that, okay, instead of Treaty of Alliance, we will have NATO membership to protect Cyprus, the question regarding what happens if the internal constitutional order collapses still remains. That's why in Crans-Montana, when Secretary General Guterres prepared his the list of main outstanding issues, which we know as the Guterres Framework now, point number 6 did not talk about NATO or any arrangement like that. It simply said a new security arrangement that does not involve the unilateral right of intervention, but involves the existing guarantor powers, must be created. Okay, so, and we accepted this. And actually, everybody accepted to hold that debate within that framework. Yes, unilateral right of intervention is a thing of the 60s, maybe a thing of the Cold War era. And we can devise something better. Why should it be unilateral right of intervention? Maybe we can, why can't we think of a new approach whereby these guarantor powers can only come if they are invited? If we call for help and if we say that our order has collapsed, we are unable to cope, please come and help. And how we signal this call for help is tied to specific constitutional procedures. So this can be done. And this would make sense. And to answer your other question, I think it was a bit rhetorical. Of course, I cannot see a scenario whereby Russia or China would be very enthusiastic about Cyprus becoming a member of NATO. Of course not.
I did have a different question, but your discussion with Halef was quite interesting, and it brought out a new question in me. So with regards to NATO entering the security dimension of a solution, I think, yeah, you did explain it quite clearly. It would be for Treaty of Alliance kind of stuff. But I mean, doesn't NATO have something to offer Turkey in the, okay, so you must have seen the Politis reports about a possible NATO solution with international bases, Americans, French, Greeks, and Turks. Essentially, yeah, making, having bases on the island. So I'm just wondering, wouldn't that present some kind of a carrot to Turkey? Because they could renegotiate troop numbers, maybe up from 650 to like 1,000, 2,000, and become part of the legitimate security architecture of the whole of Cyprus, along with an international force. I mean, if so, from what I've seen of Annan Plan and the leaked Christofias Talat convergences, we're probably not going to have a Cypriot army. So how, I mean, yeah, how does the external threats system work?
No, in our convergence papers, there is nothing that precludes having an army, a Cypriot army. So we can have a military force to defend Cyprus against outside threats. But telling Turkey that put your troops under NATO flag is not an incentive, is not a carrot. Turkey already has a legitimate legal base to keep having troops on the island. That's the Treaty of Alliance. And Turkey already expressed its willingness to withdraw in an accelerated form the number of troops it currently has on the island to the levels that were allowed by these international treaties. Give and take. Of course, the exact numbers were to be discussed if we were able to proceed at stage in Crans-Montana. But the readiness was relayed to our counterparts. Okay. So I don't think Turkey would look favorably to put her troops under the command of a commander in NATO, who can be a non-Turk. And why should they accept this? It's not a carrot for them at all. However, I think they expressed their willingness, and I think they are still there, that if the two sides agree to reach a bizonal bicommunal federation with political equality, then they are ready to do their part and decrease the number of troops to the levels near to those agreed in 1960. And I think Turkish population here, vast majority, would be more comfortable with such an arrangement. But still, I think this is not the main issue. This is not the main issue, as it was not the main issue in the troubles of 1960. We never hear anything about the intervention of the two contingents on the island in the intercommunal conflict. They just stayed in their barracks, basically. Therefore, looking at the future, the main question still remains: what kind of a security mechanism can we establish which will be a contemporary arrangement, but still be able to address the fear that if the constitutional order collapses, there will not be a rush to violence on the island.
After Guterres' visit, and now it seems both sides are working more closely than before to push for a new 5+1 meeting. We know Mr. Akıncı, at his time, proposed to agree, sign the Guterres Framework as a strategic agreement, but he didn't get the reply from the reply he hoped for, let's say, from the Greek Cypriot leader at that time, Mr. Anastasis. Do you think Mr. Guterres may create a new framework and bring it to the both sides and discuss it and maybe assign it as a strategic agreement in the new 5+1 meeting?
No. First of all, Guterres Framework cannot be a strategic agreement. Actually, we are far beyond strategic agreement. We have the agreement itself. In Crans-Montana, at the beginning of our discussion, remember we said, the Secretary General said the solution is on the table. So just talking about the strategic agreement would actually be taking a step back. It's not a move forward. And right now we have two leaders who say that all the past convergences must be protected and we should resume from where things were left off in Crans-Montana. So I don't find this, talk about going for a strategic agreement first and then talking about the rest, very useful. And I don't think this is something Guterres would do. He himself is saying that we should find a way to walk the final mile, which means that the body of work is already highly advanced to the point that the remaining part is the final mile. So why should we need, if we are going to respect all the past convergences agreement, why should we need a new strategic agreement? This is, I think, bizarre. Now, if people are talking about, when they're talking about strategic agreement, let's first establish an umbrella state without really talking about how this state will share power, deal with the property issue, handle the territorial adjustment. But just let's first establish some form of a united state, and then hope that this united state will find a way to figure out the rest. This cannot work. This will never work. This is the essence of the Cyprus problem, The Greek Cypriot side, unless they get what they want, they don't want to give us our political rights, correct? And unless we get our political rights, we don't want to give them back territory. This is the whole crux of the matter. They don't allow us back into a recognized state with our legitimate rights unless they get what they want on territory and property. And we say that we can't give you those unless you give us what we want. This is the whole Cyprus debate. So I know some ideas have been floated by the UN as well, that let's first go for some kind of a strategic agreement and allow a 3-year time period. During that time period, let's implement some confidence building measure kind of projects, like the opening of Varosha, opening of Ercan, opening of Famagusta, allow the institutions of two sides to cooperate, and then at the end of the 3-year, ask the two sides in a referendum, do you like what you have or not? If they say yes, all right, excellent, United Cyprus is formed. If not, you get to keep what you have been given in those 3 years. This is a ridiculous suggestion because in order for this to work, your institutions have to take each other as a counterpart. But this then goes right into the fear of recognition by implication, mainly from the Greek Cypriots, but not only. Okay? Therefore, pushing the sides to come up with agreements on these issues is a futile effort. Maybe it sounds nice to our ears, but in practice, it could never work. One could say UN has bought this idea, and they will push the Greek Cypriots. Well, if the UN has such a power, why shouldn't they use it to push the Greek Cypriots to walk the final mile with us? So you see, there's a big dilemma there. That's why I think, despite all the preparatory work to present something, in the final analysis, Secretary General refrained from doing such a thing. I think it was mainly somewhat an idea of Maria Olguin, but I think it was a very ill-fated attempt from the outset. It was a mistake.
I think I've got a question here which perfectly kind of runs on from what you were just talking about. So, yeah, you've explained why you don't think the idea of CBMs like that, Famagusta Port, Ercan, and Varosha, before a referendum would help things along. But Tufan has made it very clear that his strong demand is no return to the status quo if talks fail. And I think within that, there's been discussion of the 3Ds, direct trade, flights, and contacts. And obviously, Ercan would give direct flights, Mausa Limanı would give direct trade. So I'm wondering, okay, is there a mutually acceptable way of agreeing on no return to the status quo if we have to rule out irreversible CBMs? Because two-state solution, I live in the south, they would categorically reject that as a backstop, and I think everybody knows it. So how do we come up with a mutually acceptable way of, do you have any ideas of what that might look like, of no return to the status quo, that would satisfy both Greek and Turkish Cypriots?
From my point of view, there is no other way. This time, we have to resume negotiations from where we left off, with a view to establish a proper federation that will make Cyprus a proper EU state, out of a Cypriot-owned, Cypriot-led process. But if Greek Cypriot voters, and they have the right, don't want that partnership, that should be respected, but this should not allow them to keep us as a hostage. So in a referendum, instead of asking a yes or no to a specific plan, they should be presented with two options. Do you want this bizonal bicommunal federation that was created out of Cypriot-owned, Cypriot-led process and supported by your leader? Or do you opt for a well-vet divorce? In my view, this is the only way left after all the years of negotiations and the experience of 2004 and 2018 to settle the Cyprus issue. And I sincerely believe there's nothing wrong in this approach. And Greek Cypriots should not have a problem with this either. Because if they don't want to live in a two-state environment, then they should go and vote for a federal settlement. Conversely, Turkish Cypriot voters will be asked, do you want this federal settlement, or do you want to live under your unrecognized TRNC under isolation, and whatever was given to you because you had said yes, being taken back, and maybe even more consequences. Okay, so this is the only scenario left that will ensure a federal settlement in Cyprus. There is no other way. However, some people claim that this is reaching too high and we need a middle step. So if this is the case, and this is where the UN and everybody else is going for, then one can envisage an environment whereby, in my view, this is my personal view, you agree on these measures like opening of Ercan for direct flights and Famagusta for direct trade and direct representation in international institutions in an irreversible way. How will the Greek Cypriots accept this is another question, but let's assume that they are on board. Maybe open Varosha under UN control, but still not in a way that would imply territorial adjustment. So that would have to be negotiated with the UN and Turkish Cypriot side. But let's say this is done, okay? Then you have to add another element to this. because this cannot be the final future of Cyprus, because this still leaves the North out of the international law, So what must happen is you must add another referendum to this setup. You must say, okay, you said no, and now we have a new status quo in Cyprus, whereby institutions of both sides are cooperating, whereby direct flights, direct trade, and Barosha is engaged. Okay, so live under this scenario for another 3 years, and then we will do another referendum, and this will be the final referendum. Okay, so maybe you can postpone the finality further down the line, 2 or 3 years, but still you have to ask the final question at some point. Because our relation with Greek Cypriots is not one of majority or minority. We are politically equal. And if we are politically equal, one party should not be able to keep the other as a hostage, despite its yes vote for a new partnership. And this is at the heart of the problem. And I'm sorry to say that even the stronger supporters of a solution among the Greek Cypriots find this idea hard to accept. I have these discussions face to face, but I confront them frankly and tell them and ask them if they realize what is the implication of their stance. Because if you continue to claim that as long as you say no, Turkish Cypriots are condemned, despite their yes vote and all support for a federal state, they are condemned to live in an unrecognized entity, then it means that in your heart, you have not digested the idea of political equality. And you see Turkish Cypriots as a minority. And this has to be tackled once and for all. I hope that we take the direct method and we walk the final mile with a definite calendar, arbitration in the end if necessary, and then tell people the decision time has come. More than half a century has been talked about. And I really don't buy this idea that we need people to see how they can work together and live together and cooperate together. We lived hundreds of years together, hundreds of years. And that was not enough to establish that mutual respect. Who can claim that another 3 years of opening Famagusta and Ercan would do the trick? Yeah. So we have to, tackle the bull by the horns. The time has come.
I've got one more question. I don't know if Halef, how many do you have left, Halef?
I don't have a following up, so you can go on and maybe I could ask on the other.
Okay.
Other.
Yeah, and then we've got maybe 10 minutes before the end. We want to ask an audience question or two, don't we, Hussein? Okay, so my question is, I remember when there was talk about strategic agreement, you wrote on Facebook that strategic agreement already exists. It's the convergences in 2017. So it would be a waste of time. So now that the UN is preparing a new convergence document, now that there is diplomatic momentum, are you slowly getting more hopeful that this current initiative is moving in the right direction?
No, I'm getting more worried. I'm getting more worried because they lost their focus. And they're sort of diverging into side roads, which are dead ends. UN has lost its orientation, in my view. I think Secretary General's statement when he was leaving was self-conflicting. It should have focused only on methodology. There should not have been a reference to CBMs and discussions on substance as a prerequisite for 5+1. He should have known, and Olguin should have briefed him properly, that progress on substantive issues, as well as CBMs, are now impossible. As long as methodology question is not tackled properly, these cannot be delivered. So he left Cyprus by giving us a homework that cannot be fulfilled. And then this discussion came, going over the convergences, and the UN being asked to give us the correct version. This, again, is an unnecessary complication. They should have said, no, your papers are there. It's in your files. We have the same papers. You photocopied and gave those to us. Okay? So I really find it difficult to understand what the UN is doing. They seem to have lost their compass. Of course, it is our own primary responsibility as Cypriots to guide them in the right way and tell them exactly where we need their help. It's not their job to tell us what we need, okay? We need their help to come up with a compromise on methodology that will answer the concerns of both sides, okay? Our concern is we don't want to be engaged in an open-ended negotiating process again, and we tell them after the bitter experiences of the past, we can no longer open our hand fully, trusting that they will reciprocate. For example, on guarantees, we cannot say our final word because we are now stuck with the fear that they will pocket these concessions and postpone it for another time. Therefore, this is our priority, and that's why Erhürman made his. They have their valid points. They are concerned that you get what you want on day one, political equality, but what we are going to get, territorial adjustment and right of reside, is going to be implemented in stages, okay? So there is a time discrepancy, and we want assurances, okay? So this should be, this discussion should be facilitated by the UN right now. This should be their task. And Secretary General should have left Cyprus by making this absolutely clear and giving this mandate and only this mandate to his representative Olguin, saying that you are not going to generate ideas on the content. Cypriots themselves will decide whether their federation is going to be a loose one or a strong one or whatever. This is their job, not us. We already have an agreed list of competences for the federal government. Crans-Montana did not collapse because we could not agree on the list of competences. So nobody asked them to fix this problem, and they all of a sudden started generating these ideas. This is, wrong. Therefore, I am a bit concerned, not a bit, a lot concerned about the direction that the UN has taken or being pushed. They should reorient themselves and focus on methodology, engage their experts to helping us on this. We have the examples of Ireland. We have the example of South Africa, Colombia. I had discussions with Olguin several times. She explained to me that before going into substantive talks, they spent more than a year trying to come up with a proper methodology on how to address their substantive issues. So this is what must be done. But it seems UN needs to reconsider their approach on this.
Hussein, I think we can't hear you.
Yeah, okay.
Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say if Halef doesn't have any other follow-up questions, maybe we can ask a couple from the comments that we received.
Yeah, I think we can go through the chats or from the audience. because I think I have a comment little bit about because the recent when I was listening Niyazi Kızılyürek, he was telling that the current status quo serves the strategic interest of Israel and Western alliances, and that made me to ask you about whether these countries would support any solution. Because, for an example, in ongoing genocide in Palestine and Israel, I think we saw that the Greek Cypriot administration used Cyprus as a strategic place in order to make their interests. But I think you somehow answered my question with telling that we are on the final part of the negotiations, and the Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots are the ones who's going to be completing this negotiation process. Therefore, if you don't have any comment on this, I think we can go through Hüseyin and ask questions through the audience or through the comments.
My only comment on that would be, it is up to us. I mean, there can be many game spoilers, many outside influences to push us to one side or the other. But it is up to us whether we listen to those or bow to those pressures or not. If this island, our common homeland, is important enough for us to reunify, then despite all those influences, we can walk the final mile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Couple questions we received regarding the basically the agreements we achieved during the cross-month. One of our followers said on Instagram, in a program that you attended, you mentioned there are deadlock mechanisms.
Deadlock resolving.
Yeah, deadlock resolving mechanisms. Can you give couple examples of those? Because it seems there are some Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots, they are afraid that even if we have a federal government, how are we going to manage to sustain that it's going to be follow and it's not going to collapse this time?
Well, there were different types of the deadlock resolving mechanisms built into the system. So if there was no decision taken at certain level, the decision would be pushed up to a higher level. For a panel, sometimes you would include a technical outsider to end the deadlock, or sometimes you would take the issue to the Supreme Court and ask them to make a decision. Okay, and if the Supreme Court cannot decide one way or the other, then whatever is the practice would continue to be in practice. So we talk with many people. I mean, these are like I said, it's not unique to Cyprus. In all federations, you have situations like this, and all countries have their own mechanisms to overcome those. So these would not be invented only for us. We had engaged experts who were extremely proficient in the Swiss constitution, in the Belgian constitution. We looked into those and tried to learn from their experiences and created those mechanisms for the Cypriot case. So when we went to Crans-Montana, both sides were sure that we created a federal setup which can function. Neither side raised the issue of this is not going to work. We were confident that if we were able to put the final dot, this federal setup would work and be able to function properly within the EU. And this was actually sort of seconded by the experts coming from the EU. They said, this is good, you are good to go. The talks failed, not because of functionality question. The talks failed because in the final analysis, the Greek Cypriot leader said, I want 0 troops and 0 guarantees. Okay? That's why it failed. And we couldn't move. And he said, I want it right away without finalizing the remaining aspects. All I can accept, he said, is a transitional period to zero troops and zero guarantees. Okay, whereby we said regarding zero guarantees, we cannot say that we will never ever need it. We have to live and see whether this federal setup really works, whether people are happy and comfortable with it, and whether it can actually sustain itself within the setup of the European Union. And maybe after 10 years, we can revisit whether this guarantee system is required anymore or not.
Thank you so much for that. I think the other question is another important topic, which still maintains its popularity. It's about the properties. Lots of new houses will need to be built for those who will have to leave their current home. Many of those who will get their property back will not return, but instead sell their land to developers. A solution will trigger a new construction boom, putting even more pressure on the nature in Cyprus. In all the land and property negotiations, environmental protection could actually contribute to a solution. For example, instead of giving land either of the community, you could also make it become nature protection areas that aren't part of either community. But is this really possible? To preserve some of the land just for...
The land, if it is in private hands right now, then its status would not change. It is now in a private hands. If the regulations allow it, it can be built on, or sometimes regulations don't allow it. You have land, but it's in a forest, you can't build on it. So only the name on the title deed would change, but not the regulations regulating the development of that land. So whatever danger exists right now for losing our nature would continue to exist after a settlement. Only the names of the title deeds would change. However, we would be in the EU. So we would have to start complying with the EU acquis on protecting the nature. So I think that would really put us in the right direction when it comes to protecting nature in Cyprus. Because right now it's crazy what we are doing in the north. So I don't think, with a solution, our existing problem would become even worse.
I think there are many people. I think there are many people that are afraid that as soon as we get the Cyprus problem solved, they will kicked out from their current property, and they will give them back to their owners. Obviously, we want people who lost their properties in '74 to be compensated in a way, but there are many, especially among the Turkish Cypriots, they feel they will be kicked out immediately after a settlement. But that's not true, right?
It is not true at all. It is not true at all. In the areas not subject to territorial adjustment, the priority would be given to the current user. We need another podcast to go into the details of those, but no. Many of the current users would have the upper hand, whether they would continue to live there or not. The only exception to this would be, and that would be, we had the numbers, it was very, very minimal. If the person who would be returning, claiming the property, an old house, had a stronger emotional attachment to that house relative to the current user. Let's say the current user is a student living in an old Greek Cypriot property, and the person claiming the property was a Greek Cypriot who built the house himself and lived there until '74. In those cases, yes, the current user would be asked to vacate in order to allow the person with such a strong emotional attachment. But even in those cases, if there was not a straightforward, this would be taken to court. So we were not envisaging at all a big havoc, big chaos because of this property issues.
I've got another audience question. I think it would be a really quick one for Nami to answer. That's why I kind of saved it till the end. I don't really know about the structure of different federations in the EU, but one of my friends is dying of curiosity to find out.
I think we lost him.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Now we can hear you.
Okay, so one of my friends is dying to find out if the Belgian Federation is relevant to the BBF that we're hopefully heading towards.
In some aspects, we benefited from the Belgian experience, in particular regarding how Belgium operates within EU institutions. And how do they make decisions? How do they decide to vote? How do they transpose EU acquis into local legislation? The Belgian example was quite useful on that one in particular.
Mr. Nami, thank you so much for joining our podcast. I think it was a really good program this week. I think, sorry for guys, we weren't able to answer all of your questions, but the information you gave us, I think, answered many of those. I would like to give you the final words. Like, what would you like to tell the youth of Cypriots? Like, because our audience is mostly young Cypriots from both communities. What would you tell them as your final words? Like, how would you want them to root or work for peace and reunification in the island?
Well, I'm extremely moved that you are doing this. Don't give up on Cyprus. Don't give up on your common homeland. We have something beautiful here, a beautiful culture, beautiful island. The only thing that's wrong with it is the Cyprus problem. Once we eliminated it from our life, then Cyprus will become really a jewel in the Mediterranean and a beacon of hope for the rest of the world in this part of the world where conflict, unfortunately, is all around us. We are all Europeans. We have to act like Europeans, respecting democracy, rule of law, respect for human rights. If we can't do it, then what hope is there for all the other people around the world who don't enjoy being so close and in the European family? So I encourage you to continue this important work. People should be more involved in the peace process, especially the young people, because whatever we decide to sign, it will be you who will be living in it, actually. So it's only just that you are more involved and have a better, more important say in all of this. So continue the good work.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for watching it. Thank you, Tim and Halef, for joining. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me.